The sea takes. It keeps what it wants and it buries the rest in a blue silence that feels older than memory. Yet beneath the turquoise calm off the western edge of Yonaguni Island, something rises. A sequence of terraces and sheer walls, cut as if by a sculptor's chisel and stacked like the steps of a submerged ziggurat. For many who first saw it, that shape was not merely rock, it was a voice from a lost world, a question hurled up through 10,000 years of tides. This is the story of the Yonaguni Monument, a place where ocean, stone, and argument meet, and where the past refuses to give an easy answer. Welcome back to Singularity Animations. Tonight we dive into a mystery that sits at the edge of history and geology, a place where every chisel-like groove and every plane of rock has pushed scholars into furious disagreement and sent divers home with images that look like city ruins from a drowned myth. It began, as many modern mysteries do, with a quiet stumble into the unknown. In 1986, local diver Kihachiro Aratake, searching for hammerhead sharks and pushed farther from the usual routes by curiosity, found an expanse of stepped rock beneath the waves. He returned with photographs and stories. Then, in time, with the stunned realization that what he had found did not resemble ordinary seabed. The discovery spread quickly, and the formation took on names. Yonaguni Monument, Kaite Iseki, the monument on the bottom of the sea. What confronted those first divers was cinematic. Broad platforms, terraces that fall away in right angles, channels that slice between massive slabs, and what to some looked like stairways and an arena. The largest feature stretches nearly 150 meters and plunges to depths of around 25 to 30 meters. Photographs show crisp edges and flat plains that, at a glance, seem designed rather than accidental. For the popular imagination, such images fit easily into a narrative of lost cities and ancient architects. They are visually irresistible. Into that cinematic scene stepped Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus. Kimura would become the most persistent advocate for the idea that Yonaguni is not merely a geological curiosity, but a human-made complex, perhaps a collection of temples, terraces, and roads created when sea levels were lower and the island's coastal plain was above water. He argued in public lectures and papers that chisel marks, right-angled corners, and an apparent concentration of features pointed to purposeful shaping. Over years of fieldwork, he suggested dates that ranged from the end of the last ice age to a few thousand years ago, and he even connected the site in popular commentary to regional oral traditions and the tantalizing speculations about prehistoric civilizations. But science, when it meets spectacle, rarely sings from a single voice. For many geologists, the Yonaguni Monument is a textbook performance of nature's powers. Robert M. Schoch, a geologist who has dived and studied the formation, emphasized the natural explanations: parallel bedding planes, fractures called joints, and the relentless work of waves acting on sandstone can produce flat terraces, straight edges, and rectangular blocks. Similar step-like sandstone formations exist onshore at sites like Sunny Nudai, suggesting that jointing and erosion can create shapes that look, to the untrained eye, suspiciously architectural. Schoch and other mainstream geoscientists argue that many of the features Kimura highlights, roads, walls, even supposed carvings, are the coincidental outcomes of natural fracture patterns and erosion. The debate is not just scientific, it's cultural and political. Neither the Japanese Agency for Cultural Affairs nor Okinawa Prefecture recognizes Yonaguni as a cultural artifact deserving preservation, and no official national excavation or protection program has been launched. That vacuum allowed a strange ecosystem to develop around the site. Skeptical geologists, impassioned proponents of ancient civilizations, dive tour operators, television crews, and freelance researchers all circling the same stone enigma. The result? A literature of careful geological studies, speculative books and TV programs, and an online world of heated argument.
If we step back and look at the geology, the more sober, less romantic layer, the argument is persuasive. Sandstone, the principal rock of the Yonaguni Formation, often fractures along bedding planes and sets of joints. Those fractures can create blocky forms with near right angles. Add tectonic uplift, earthquakes, and sea level changes, and you have a recipe for exposing flat surfaces and long linear joints. In 2019, researchers including Takayuki Ogata carried out topographical analyses and field investigations of comparable outcrops on Yonaguni and concluded that the monument's geometry could indeed result from natural weathering and erosional processes acting on bedding and linear joints, a finding that reinforced skepticism among mainstream scientists. Yet the story refuses to settle. There are details that complicate a tidy geological explanation. Some terraces appear unusually flat and aligned. Certain platforms lack the expected scatter of collapsed blocks that pure erosion would often leave behind. And small, apparently worked features, grooves and cavities that resemble carvings, have been photographed, cataloged, and debated. Proponents of artificiality point out features they argue are unlikely to be made by chance. And they ask why, if nature can do this perfectly here, it would do so in such a concentrated and symmetrical manner. Graham Hancock and other alternative historians have championed the site as possible evidence of an advanced prehistoric culture, while archaeologists caution that without tools, artifacts in context, and datable material, the claims remain speculative. Into those contested waters have stepped several other voices. German geologist Wolf Wickmann, who observed the site on expeditions, leaned toward natural explanations after field study. Patrick D. Nunn, a professor of oceanic geoscience, has also pointed out onshore analogs and the power of jointing and wave action. Local researchers and divers, meanwhile, continue to find tantalizing fragments, bits of pottery and stone tools on nearby shores, and submerged terraces, and natural formations that, to some observers, look like doorways, towers, or carved statues. But caution is the bedrock of archaeology. Without clear stratified contexts or radiocarbon dates tied to human activity at the monument itself, the claim that humans constructed Yonaguni remains an extraordinary assertion requiring extraordinary evidence. There are lesser-known corners of the Yonaguni story that deserve attention. Sani Nudai, a coastal geological formation on Yonaguni Island, displays step-like sandstone that closely resembles part of the underwater monument, offering a natural laboratory for comparison. Teruaki Ishii, a geology professor in Tokyo, contributed to discussions about sea level changes that could place parts of the formation above water at the end of the last ice age. Local dive operators and small teams have cataloged dozens of micro-features, straight-edged blocks, channels, and apparent tool marks that never made the headlines but animate the debates among specialists who spend their lives underwater. These granular observations, recorded by both professional and amateur researchers, form the complicated data set that any conclusive theory will have to address. What keeps the argument alive is not only the stones themselves, but the questions they raise about human resilience and the fragility of memory. If parts of Yonaguni were shaped by human hands thousands of years ago, they would push back the timeline of monumental architecture in East Asia and force a rethinking of how communities adapted to rising seas and shifting coastlines at the end of the Ice Age. Imagine coastal settlements submerged as sea levels rose, their waterlogged horizons now a coral-slick graveyard, and cultural knowledge of those communities erased from the shorelines we study today. That possibility, whether ultimately borne out at Yonaguni or not, reframes archaeological practice. What if our record of early human ingenuity is biased toward the dry land that survived? The truth of Yonaguni may lie somewhere between the extremes, nature's artistry refined by human hands, or an astonishing coincidence of jointing and erosion so regular it conjures architecture. Either conclusion is humbling. If it is man-made, the structure asks us to accept that sophisticated coastal societies once existed, their traces now muffled by the sea. If it is natural, the monument still teaches us how easily natural processes can mimic purpose, and how our hunger for patterns can turn stone into myth. Both outcomes demand patience, nuance, and above all, more evidence. In the end, Yonaguni asks a simple human question. When the ocean reclaims the things we make, how will future generations read the remnants? Will they see order, design, memory, or will they see only the quiet geometry of waves and time? The work of scholars like Masaaki Kimura and critics like Robert Schoch, the careful mapping by geoscientists, and the tireless observations of divers and local residents together form the only honest answer we have. A messy, contested, and wonderfully human conversation with the past. As our final image fades, imagine descending into that blue silence again, through shafts of sunlight, past terraces that could be stairs or the lines of a fracture, toward a horizon where stone meets a very old sea. Whatever Yonaguni ultimately proves to be, it is already a monument, not solely to a vanished civilization, but to curiosity itself, to the stubborn, inconvenient human need to ask, to turn over a stone, to dive deeper, and to listen for what the ocean will keep and what it will return to the light.